I'm so excited to be here. I've been over my Christian school now. I'm in my 19th year, and people would come to Bethel Church, and they would be in revival and all kinds of exciting things going on in their church. And I find out, hey, they have a Christian school. So I'd go talk to the pastor, and I'd say, what are you doing with your Christian school? And they'd look at me and go, nothing. We don't want to mess up what's going on in our school. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You need to mess up what's going on in your school. Foundations for Kingdom Education. William already mentioned this. Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart. That's like in almost every school. We all are trying to figure that out. The problem is, what is the way? For generations, we've created catechisms, we have rules, we have Bible studies, we have all these things that we're trying to establish what is the way that children should be raised in. And honestly, we're not doing a very good job on the whole. I don't mean to be critical because I feel like I've made these same mistakes. When training up my own kids, I had a son that just wanted to walk away from God when he was in high school. And I thought I was doing a really good job. So we really have to think about, in kingdom education, what is the way that we're going to train these kids? I thought, when I took this job, that it was the heart of the leader. That's going to be the most important thing. When I was going to become the head of the school, I was so excited because we're going to have a school that kids are going to pray for healing, and they're going to speak in tongues, and it's just going to be this great place where God's going to show up. And I was really excited, and I was going to make every kid do it. And fortunately, God had me read this article. It was in the ACSI magazine, and a lady had done a study of Christian schools to find out why they weren't producing strong Christians. And what surprised me is I was critical of these other Christian schools because they weren't being successful, and I was going to be really successful. But I found out that 98% of the school leaders had my same heart. They had my same drive, my same desire. They're in this to train up people to be mighty Christians. And they weren't being successful. And I thought, God, I'm going to go down that same path. I'm going to turn out the same way. What's different? The other thing that shocked me about the study is that the teachers felt like their job was to train in a Christian environment. This is what William was talking about, I think it was William, about that whether is it Christians teaching or is it educators that are trying to be in a Christian environment. So, and then the amazing thing of that was the students' goal was that they could get really smart and make lots of money. So this has been the results of most Christian education. So something isn't working. Something has to change. So I thought, okay, well, it must be methods, all right? It's got to be the methods. And then I got to thinking about, well, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, they had great methods. Those schools were all established to create pastors. They're seminaries. And look at where they're at now. They teach against the Bible. They teach against God. So how do you lose sight of the goal? And it really is what we're talking about. You've got to put God first. There's this great quote from Michael Yaconelli, I think it is. Yaconelli. He actually lived in my area. He lived just about 50 miles north of where I was at. It's a ranch community, lots of cows. He said that one day he was talking to a farmer, and he found out, he talked about how cows escape the safety of the pasture. So what happens is cows are just happily eating a lump of grass, and then they see another one, and they wander over there, and they eat that lump of grass. And then they go over to another one, and then pretty soon they're by the edge of the fence, and then there's some really nice grass on the other side of the fence, and there happens to be a hole, and they walk through it. And the next thing you know, they're in the middle of the highway in a dangerous place. And that's what happens to us in education. We start to adapt the philosophies of the secular world, and we don't even realize it. We see things that they look like they're working really, really well, and we grab hold of them. And we're just like those cows. We just slowly wander right out of the safety of the pasture where God put us, and we're out in the middle of the highway, and we're wondering what went wrong. So we have to be careful of the accepted wisdom that's around us. And there are incredible teaching methods. I am not trying to say that we don't want to follow teaching methods that we're learning from the secular world. But we just have to be careful that it is Christ-centered in what we're doing. The wisdom of this world is unknowingly woven into our understanding because it looks like it's working. One of the things that looks like it's working is classroom management. A lot of teachers use what I call command and control in their classroom. They are the power symbol, and the kids bow to them, and the kids behave. They really look like they're doing a great job. The problem is, those kids are scared of the teacher. They don't even like their teacher. They don't even want to be in the room with their teacher. And what kind of learning environment is that? How does that show the love of God when you're in a classroom where the kid thinks that the teacher hates them? So it's a method that looks like it's working, but honestly, it's not kingdom. So as I was pondering this, about 2 years ago, I got a text in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, from a prophetic guy, Bob Hartley. You know, it's like, why do prophetic people do that in the middle of the night? I was sleeping, I was doing really well, and I get this text, and he says, you're going to be teaching educators, and you have something really important to say. I'm looking at the phone, 2 o'clock in the morning, and now I can't go to sleep. Okay, God, what is this? And so I'm laying there, I'm going, God, what is it? What is it? And God says, Gideon. And I went, Gideon? Gideon is not an educational story. There's nothing in Gideon that has to do about God. I mean, about education, lots about God. Sometimes you have to do what I'm thinking, not what I say, okay? So I said, God, what is it with Gideon? And it took me a long time. I read the story through several times, and here he is. An angel of the Lord shows up. He puts some food out for it, and the angel touches the rock and burns up the sacrifice. I mean, that's a pretty good sign that God's there, right? You know, I've never had anybody show up with me and touch a rock and burn things up. And I think if somebody came along and said, God's given you assignment, here's the proof, poof, I think I would do it. So Gideon goes and he tears down the altar to the Baal, and then he's already been given the assignment that he's going to set his people free, and yet he still needs another sign. He does the fleece after that. So I'm just pondering this, and what does this have to do with education? And I actually happened to be at Sandy Wood School, and the kids were, or no, it was at Kansas City, and the kids were worshiping, and God reminds me of this story, and I go, okay, Baal. They were worshiping Baal. What does that mean? So instead of worshiping, I pull out my phone and I text, what does Baal mean? And what I realized, the god Baal was the god of fertility, and he was the god that provided the dew and the rain so that they could survive. Everybody thought that they had to do this. This was such an important thing to worship Baal, because if they didn't worship Baal, they wouldn't have enough rain. And the Midianites were coming and destroying their crops, so the only thing they could eat is what grew out in the wild. If you didn't have enough rain and you're surviving off what grows in the wild, you're going to die. So there was this prevailing wisdom that had penetrated into the people at the time, that if you did not worship Baal, we are all going to die. So Gideon tears it down and they didn't die. And yet still, it was still such a strong prevailing wisdom that he needed a sign that actually proved that Baal was nothing. That's why the fleece, because if Baal controlled the dew and the rain, God had to beat Baal. And what I realized in education is we have false gods. We have things that we hold on to because we think that they're so important. If we don't do them, we're going to die. Our kids are never going to make it. They're not going to be successful. They're not going to be prepared for university. They're not going to be prepared for their job. And actually what we're doing is we're doing things that are counterproductive to what God has for them. So I'm here just to bring up a question. I'm not really bringing the answer, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll get that here today as we talk about it. But it's really important that we understand that there are things that we are doing that have to change. One of them, what I mentioned, the way that we manage our classrooms. If we're managing our classrooms with fear and control, we are totally going against what God has. It's not God's ways. The other thing that I learned from Gideon is less is more. When they got ready to take over, when they went to fight, God just kept paring down, paring down, paring down. We always think we need more money. We always think we need more teachers. We always think we need a better facility. But I tell you what, I am meeting people all over this nation that have little tiny schools that are changing the world. I just saw a video from a young gal in Detroit, inner city school. Her students pay like $100 a month to go to her school. The teachers are volunteers. They survive on donations. And you should see this video, these kids quoting scripture and just standing up and declaring who God is. So God's going to give us what we need. So kingdom educators must rethink how we teach. That's our goal. That's what we're doing. We have got to change how we do things. Our methods are incredibly important. We have to have methods. But our methods are only tools. They're like a tool belt. And we pull out and we use different methods with different things. We don't all have to do the same thing. If you go to Sandy Wood School, it doesn't look a thing like my school. If I go to your schools, they're not going to look like mine. You don't need to come to Bethel Christian School and go, okay, I'm going to be just like you. In fact, I encourage people, don't be like me. Ask God who you are. What's your community need? What are you doing? So we've got to just rethink. And I am so excited to be with people that want to rethink, that want to live off of what God is doing now and not what God used to do. So that's it. Thanks.